Hello, and welcome to Wine, Whiskey, and Words. I'm Daniel.
I'm Brad.
If you're new to the show, every time we get together, we're going to start by opening a drink of the week. We're going to talk about where that drink came from, where we found it, what we think about it. We're going to open it up. We're going to taste it. We're going to talk about what we think, how we like it smell, how we like the taste. Usually it'll be wine or whiskey, but we might get adventurous and go into beer, possibly. Brad mentioned absinthe last time.
Yeah.
Maybe some tequila, some just interesting things we find out there that we think you might want to hear about. Once we've had our drink and talked about it, we're going to mention an interesting thing we saw between the last session and this one. And I keep saying week, and I apologize, but it's going to be about every 2 weeks is what we're aiming for. We're going to discuss our interesting thing, and it'll just be brief. Hey, I saw this; it was really cool. And then finally, we're going to work into a discussion each week at the end of the week or each meeting at the end of the meeting. We're going to talk about a topic for the next time we get together. And we'll discuss it to the best of our ability. We're going to try to bring as much information as we can find with, Dr. Google. But we're just going to do our best. We are by no means experts on much of anything, really.
Um, I'm an expert at talking.
Yeah, we're really good at talking. But that's about it. We'll finish our discussion and then we'll wrap up and present the topic for the next week. So we're glad you could join us. If you're joining us for the first time, please give us feedback on things you like, things you think we could improve. If you're coming back, thank you so much for listening again.
And if there's a topic that you would like us to address, feel free to mention that as well.
Absolutely. So I get to do the presentation this week. Last week, Brad brought a lovely Cab Franc.
It was a Cab Franc. I meant to bring a Cab Sav, but I brought a Cab Franc, and so I had to purchase a few more of those to replace that one. So,
well, the Cab Franc was awesome, and I'm going to do the reveal. This is the fancy plastic bag of destiny.
by looking at the top, I was guessing it was a whiskey.
It is a whiskey. It is Doc Swinson's Alter Ego Triple Cask.
Okay.
And I did a little research this time on the Alter Ego series and Doc Swinson's in general. So Doc Swinson's is out of Washington. And it sounds like, and this is all based on their website, and guys from Doc Swinson's, if you ever hear this, I apologize if I get anything wrong. Please let me know. They didn't intend to make a whiskey, it sounds like. They were contract distillers. They were trying to make vodkas and things like that for wells, quality liquors at an affordable price. So they started making whiskeys just as a pet project. The company is called Distiller's Way, was the parent company. And I guess they found that it worked for them. And their blender, Jesse Parker, has been making drinks since the third grade. He made a root beer for his class.
Really?
Yes. Like I said, again, all from their website. I hope his class enjoyed it. But he spent his developing ages blending different things and trying different flavors, and now he's their master blender. They have quite a few other beverages, mostly whiskeys from the Doc Swinson brand. They do have a rum called Lost Nectar. They have a bottled in bond rye, and this is a blend that is their. They take a base blend, which is called Blender's Cut, which is kind of their everyday drinking bourbon, and they age it in different kinds of casks. So this Alter Ego series, there are 3 different ones. This one, again, is straight bourbon whiskey finished in sherry and cognac casks. I got this from the liquor store here in Florida. I think it was $60 maybe. It wasn't too pricey. It was pretty affordable. It may be different depending on where you are. I know in Alabama and California, prices get a little high sometimes for different reasons. But this one is actually finished in sherry and cognac casks. It says it spends 5 years in American white oak casks, then 11 to 12 months in ex-cognac casks. And I found out something interesting that I did not know. There's something called a feeder, Foeder, that it's just a giant barrel that they use for aging cognac. And I had never heard of this. I thought it was kind of neat. But they spend 11 to 12 months in sherry casks, and then 11 months to 2 years in a different kind of sherry cask. So I'm a little excited about this one. It is 95.8 proof, but I think it's going to be good.
Open up the fucking bottle.
All right, well, I will. This has the nice little, I hope I don't show my inexperience and not being.
I think you've got that.
I got it. Look at that.
That's a pretty simple one.
Look at that clean little pour there. All right, we're going to try this straight. This is formula number 1362425, in case you're tracking that. It's got a really nice color to it. Sometimes you get some whiskeys that are kind of light in their look. I think this one's really nice. It doesn't have a really strong burn to it. Every once in a while I'll get a bourbon and I just feel like the alcohol is too far forward on the nose.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes when you nose them, you're like, you feel that fire, but you don't. I mean, you get a little bit of that sweetness.
I get a lot of caramel out of this one on the smell.
Caramel, the corn.
Yes, for sure.
The viscosity, the body of it, I like how it feels a little bit thick. I'm not sure about the aftertaste, because it seems a little bit off for me, but I like the first part, the sweetness that I get.
Yeah, it's very smooth and easy drinking. I find it, I actually like the aftertaste. It almost has a cherry as opposed to the sherry cask. It also has a cherry flavor on the aftertaste too.
I kind of get that a little bit. I've never been a big fan of like maraschino cherries.
I don't think it's that. It's more like a dark, but okay.
But as I try it more, that aftertaste kind of goes away, and I get more sweetness.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's very easy drinking, though. I was worried that with a high proof like that, it would be really burning, but it's not.
It's not burning at all.
I had actually suggested we try this with some water, and we may, but I actually think this is a perfect whiskey to just drink neat. You don't really need to add anything to it.
I'm actually getting, Lord knows, after having the wine and a little bit of this, now I'm trying to remember, a little bit of like a black licorice note.
Okay.
To it.
Okay. So I was at Cooper's Hawk not too long ago. We're going to talk about Cooper's Hawk pretty regularly because I go regularly.
And I work there.
And some guy asked me, he said, "What is with this wine? I don't drink much wine because I don't know all these flavors. People ask me what you taste, and I just taste wine." And I said, everybody's going to taste something different anyway. Yes, there are things that most people will taste, but it's really, do you like it or not? What do you like in it? And if you care to try to find different flavors, great. If you don't, just enjoy what you're drinking.
This is what I tell people all the time, is that you're going to see what the notes are that you can smell or taste, and you may smell or taste them, but you may smell or taste different things. And you're not wrong, because that's true for you, because everyone has a different palate.
Yeah, I mean, I like spicy food. I like Indian food. I like Thai food and things like that. My wife, no way. Not at all. She actually gets mad at me when I cook Indian food in the house. She said, "Never again." I said, "Well, within 48 hours of you being home." She goes, "No, at least a week."
A week?
Yeah, she was,
You need to like get some curry and hide it in the corner somewhere.
Yeah, I value my marriage, Brad.
All right, I will go next time I'm over. I will bring a thing of curry, sprinkle a little bit in the back portion of a cupboard.
All right, fair. Well, we're gonna work our way back into what we promised we would do. I just want to say, last week we were getting started and we're figuring things out. We've tried to make some adjustments. We got some really good feedback, and I thought it was really constructive in some ways. And so we've tried to do a little more research and be a little more organized in our approach this time. And I hope you guys enjoy it. And please, if you find things that you think we could still do better, let us know. Give us a review and give us some words to tell us how to do it.
It's all about improvement. I've been in sales my entire life. I've never done a podcast, and so there may be things that I want to hear in a podcast, but you might want to hear differently. And so, because I'm not the audience for this podcast, you are, I want to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. And we had some of our feedback last week. They mentioned the audio, so we actually just spent a considerable amount of time trying to figure out how to work this system. And as you can see, we've got video this time. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're not, you
I'm
can't
so
see
sorry for this.
it. Well, it is what it is.
Right.
So, so I guess moving on to our topic, Brad, I'm going to let you present this topic.
Well, I think first we're going to talk about what did we see this week.
Right. I am getting things out of order.
That's all right.
The interesting thing of the week.
I mean, for me, other than me getting affected by pollen, so I'm going to actually in 2 weeks, this is a little foregoing, I'm heading to Chicago. Cooper's Hawk is flying me out there. So I'm going to get to enjoy a few meals over there. I'm going to go to a different winery that they're bringing us to. I believe it's a Linford winery. So I'm excited. Anytime I can try different wines, because Lord knows I work at Cooper's Hawk, but I have several different wine club memberships. I'm always in for trying different stuff.
So I've said to people many times, if I ever hit it big and get one of these $1 billion lotteries, or just happen to, maybe if our podcast becomes a $1 billion podcast, if I ever do that, my goal in life, unless I really like something, is going to be to just never taste the same thing twice. I love flavors. I love tasting different things, and so I could just go through life just trying different stuff.
You're insane.
Yeah. My wife.
I mean, if I find something that I love, I'm gonna want to get more of that. But I'm still gonna try other stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but I still think for the most part, I would just try different things almost every day. All right, moving on. So your interesting thing is that you're going to Chicago?
I'm going to Chicago.
All right.
In 2 weeks.
That's awesome.
I'm excited.
So my interesting thing once more is it's actually something I knew about. Years ago, I listened to this podcast called The Art of Manliness, which actually is a really interesting podcast. And don't let the name put you off. I think it's really great for anybody. And they made a big deal. They would reference this Man in the Arena speech. And it's a Teddy Roosevelt speech that they reference a small portion of it where he talks about being the man in the arena and getting negative jeers, the guys that aren't in the arena, and how they maybe shouldn't be listened to as much as you might otherwise. But it came to mind the other day, and I looked it up. And this speech goes into the importance of virtue and education in a growing nation, and talks about how democracy depends on the wisdom of its people. Whereas a dictatorship, if you got a smart, wise, decent dictator, that's all you need. You just need one guy. But democracy depends on a lot of people. So I actually revisited the Man in the Arena speech. And if you Google it, it's worth a read. It's a bit long, but I thought it was just beautiful. And I did not realize it was as broad as it actually was. I just thought it was this brief little blurb that Teddy Roosevelt said.
So I have one question in regards to that. Do you fancy yourself a dictator?
I mean, I think it'd be a pretty decent dictator.
Okay.
Benevolent
dictator.
Yeah, I feel like I could get
Would every household get a bottle of whiskey?
Absolutely. One a week.
You can be my dictator.
For sure. So, so that's the interesting thing. Now,
I'm going to put a drop of water in this.
Okay.
Just to see.
I'll try that.
All right.
Try that. So we're going to give it a little more taste. Just a little bit of water. See what we think. Did it open up at all?
It gives a bit of like a mintiness.
So I actually think it changes even the nose. Like I feel like I'm getting more butterscotch now.
100%. It changes it completely.
Chemistry is just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually really like it. Now you got to be very careful with this one. It's so smooth and easy drinking.
Yeah.
I actually think I put a little too much water, so I'm going to add a little whiskey. But like I said, I think it really adds to it.
You know what? I think I too added a little bit too much water.
Of course you did.
Thank you.
All right. So,
on to the topic.
What was our topic last week, Brent?
Our topic was homeschooling versus traditional schooling.
Okay. Okay. So what do you got for us?
Well,
you must be the expert now.
little I researched a little bit, but my main thoughts are this: uh, schooling is a very difficult subject because you always have different people talking about it from different ways. You have the people who believe certain things should be taught. You have people who believe certain things shouldn't be taught. You have teaching to the tests versus teaching to the student. Um, but what I looked around a little bit is that based on uh, a lot of things that are researched, about 32 different points, there was a ranking of what states were higher versus lower in schools, and then they also ranked quality of the education and safety as well. And so it was interesting too that
Now this is all schools or just
this is
public schools?
all schools,
Okay.
all schools across all of the states, including the District of Columbia. Um, and so, interestingly enough, you had a lot of the ones that were the, on the lower end. You also had higher dropout rates. You had the ones that were, as far as the quality of the education, ranked a little bit higher towards the safety, although there's some different outliers. But you had the ones that were definitely more towards the bottom as far as the quality, ranked towards the bottom as far as the safety as well. So ultimately, what I'm looking at, because they also rank things with like ACT scores, the the SAT scores, math test, reading, um, but the things that it also looked at, like percentage of threatened and injured high school students.
That's an alarming thing to hear about
Yeah,
at all.
bullying incident rates. So ultimately, when it comes down to this for me, you've got to look at individually what's going to be best for your child. Um, if you've got these schools that are teaching to the tests, and if you feel that they're not going into what's going to be best for your child, and if you're able to go ahead and subsidize and look at different um, options for homeschooling, if you can do the homeschooling, then do it. But when you've got states like Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Wisconsin, Virginia, there's the top five as far as the quality of education, as far as that. Um, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but also those tend to be a little bit states that are a little bit more business, a little bit well off.
Okay.
Whereas you've got the states that are on the towards the bottom. You've got Alabama, Louisiana, Alaska, West Virginia, and Arizona, which they also ranked uh, towards the very bottom as far as safety is concerned as well.
So I think something that's really interesting is the approach you took to researching this and the approach I took. I actually kind of approach this from a more historical perspective.
Talk to me.
You seem to have gotten really like latched onto the analytical, statistics and things. And usually I would be that guy. For some reason, I went a different direction. And you think about it. For thousands of years, we had people who agriculture. Their kids didn't need to go to school; they needed to work a plow. And so you think, oh well, homeschooling's been around forever. But what I found out was actually between the mid 1800s and 1970 in the U.S., homeschooling was very rare. It was very uncommon. It was actually illegal in a lot of places.
Really?
Yes. So state compulsory attendance laws started in about 1852. Massachusetts was the first state that required compulsory school attendance, and it kind of flowed up. Florida didn't even have it until 1915, and then in the 1910s, the last states that were doing it were Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, Texas, Georgia, and Mississippi. Alaska was last, but they joined last, so kind of makes sense. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. That something I thought was just a really old uh, process was actually very new. And what happened was in the 1970s, this guy, John Holt, who was an educational theorist, was like, look, schools are just designed to make compliant employees. And honestly, I kind of agree with him.
Oh no, 100%, because they're they've got uh, their pay increases, their bonuses are tied immediately onto how well these students perform on these national tests.
Mhm. Now, I don't know that testing was as big of a thing back in the 70s.
Right.
I wasn't around. So I'm just a baby.
I'm
But
old.
yes. But no, this guy, John Holt, he was actually he went to Yale, graduated as an industrial engineer, then became a Navy submariner in World War II, which was like, wow. Like, and then he actually joined the United World Federalists, which was a group aimed at building one world government, which was a popular thing after World War II. Everybody was
Right.
like, hey, maybe if we all get together, we won't kill each other. Seems like a good
Yeah.
idea. But he eventually left and became a teacher, and very rapidly just became disillusioned with the whole process. He was like, this is garbage. So he actually said, one of his quotes was, I apologize, I've gone the wrong way, was children who were provided with a rich and stimulating learning environment would learn what they were ready to learn when they are ready to learn it. And that actually, to me, I knew some people who went to Montessori schools. And Montessori schools are very much like, we bring the kids in and we have teachers. But if they want to work on science all day today, we're going to work on science. And if they want to work on math all day today, we're going to work on math. And there's a lot of freedom associated. So it was kind of interesting to see that overlap.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because the prior administration, not to get political, but because this school is in Miami, there was a new school. They tried to stop them and defund them, because this is a school that really is geared towards the arts. So you have a lot of students who want to go ahead and focus on set production, on acting,
Okay.
script writing, things like that, and they're trying to defund them. And to me, it's a way of going, hey, you're not like me, so you shouldn't be this way. Whereas that's, to me, the opposite of education.
So what's interesting to me, yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I think there are a lot of things being defunded today because people, for one reason or another, undervalue them. Music is one. Sports even have been,
Right.
in some cases, underfunded. But in addition to John Holt, there was a guy named Raymond S. Moore, who was also an educational theorist. And he's actually, you can go on his website. There's a Moore Foundation. Now, he's passed now. But he actually is a very popular name in homeschooling. He wrote a book called Homegrown Kids, which kind of became one of the foundational texts. And his foundation talks about, now he was religious. He was a Seventh-day Adventist. And so he was a little Bible-based, but his formula was this: study for a few minutes to several hours daily based on the maturity. Do manual work at least as much as you study, which I find really fascinating. Like, that's a big shift from what you see in public schools. Public schools don't do that.
Right.
And then do home or community service an hour or so daily, or kind of spread it out and move it to the weekend or whenever it's practical. So again, this guy focused on allowing students to pursue their interests freely, which is not something that happens in public schools. I mean, I did not do well in public school because they were like, "You're going to learn this." I was like, "That's stupid. I don't want to learn that. Like, that's boring. Why would I want to learn that? I'd rather learn about history." I'd rather learn about science. I don't want to focus on the space under a curve calculus or whatever that
Well,
is.
the problem is that, as I said, they're told that they have to teach to a certain curriculum, but when we do that, we're not focusing on the needs of the students.
Or the needs of society.
Right.
If everybody comes out learning how to be a mathematician, you know, who's going to build our walls? Who's going to
Right.
write our novels?
And now I'm not here to say that I'm in favor of homeschooling or in favor of traditional education, but I'm in favor of what's in it, what's best for the individual student. And it's interesting that there's only 5 current states that are offering tax credits for those for homeschooling.
So it's actually miraculous that we even have homeschooling legal in the United States.
Right.
Is what I've learned. Because, as I said, when Moore and Holt were in the mix, it was unheard of. It was illegal, and there was actually a big fight throughout the decades of the 70s and 80s. It went to the Supreme Court. I mean, at that point, it went to the Supreme Court, and it was Amish people trying to say, I don't want my kid in public schools. I want to teach them in my house. Supreme Court ultimately decided in favor of the Amish people, but the Supreme Court was very narrow. They said, hey, only if you have a religious exemption. Now, all these state battles happened subsequently that kind of opened things up. We actually had a foundation. There's a guy named Michael Ferris who was pretty big later in life. He's actually still around today. He was involved in the Trump thing and all that. But he founded Patrick Henry College, but he founded this Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which was an association solely focused on getting homeschool legalized, making sure parents had the right and the ability to teach their kids how they wanted. Now, he was actually part of this movement in the 80s of sort of Christianizing homeschooling. So my first introduction to homeschooling was with really, really radical evangelical people. And to be fair, when I started researching this today, I said, I'm going to be really negative on this. I'm going to have a hard time being unbiased because my views were very negative about homeschooling. But as I started researching, I actually learned that it came out of this almost insurgent attitude about education. You were viewed as a rebel if you were involved in homeschooling. But in the 80s, evangelicals said, "Hey, Christian public schools are Satan worshiping houses of evil." And I love my grandparents. My grandparents were like that. They would show me videos about how awful everything was. In fact, I stopped going to church because they told me Star Trek was work of the devil. That's where I drew the line. I was like, don't mess with my Star Trek, man. Jean-Luc Picard didn't.
How did they feel about Star Wars?
I don't know. We never really broached it, but boy, AC/DC was a solid no, I will say. And
Maybe your grandparents were Star Wars people, and that's why they were down on Star Trek.
The Trekkies and the Star Wars don't always get along.
It doesn't always.
So anyway, like I said, I just think it's interesting how that movement evolved and how my perceptions were very, oh, this is just the crazy Christians doing this thing. And like even the normal Christians thought they were crazy, but that's not true at all. It was actually more of a subversive movement by the liberals that got sort of taken over by Michael Ferris and others who said, hey, we can take our kids out of this public school and get them only exposed to the things we want. And it wasn't until the 2000s and maybe the late 90s, that other groups kind of said, no, you know what? We don't have to be part of that anymore. We actually find good reasons. For instance, no bullying. You mentioned the pros and cons. And talking about that, not being bullied is a big one. I don't want my kid to be picked on all the time. I don't want my kid to be exposed to a bunch of unpleasant people that they are stuck with all the time. Yeah, so.
But now it's interesting mentioning that too, as far as, the bullying, because that also leads into, costs associated with homeschooling, because you still need to go ahead and socialize the kids. I was looking earlier today, and no, this is what happens when you get old. You need to take your glasses off to see. So, how much can homeschooling cost? Well, the average cost per year of homeschooling is look about $500 to $2,500.
It's not too bad when you think
Well,
about the cost of other schools.
hold on, that's the low figure.
Oh, okay.
Okay, online homeschooling, 400 to 6,000. Now, your kid might need some tutoring as well. So, homeschooling with supplemental tutoring, it's about $700 to $7,000 per year, and this is per student. If you have homeschooling with a shared private teacher, $12,000 to $35,000, and homeschooling with a private teacher, $35,000 to $70,000. Now, if you compare that to cost of public schools, which free tuition, but then you're talking about $100 to $1,000 for extracurricular activities. A private parochial school, $3,000 to $36,000, and then you've got your private schools, which are going to be anywhere from $13,000 to $70,000 per year. But you've got to take a look at, if you're homeschooling, traditionally you're still going to want to do some of those activities that you would do in a normal school. And so what are the costs of those extracurricular activities too? And that's going to add up as well.
So I will say, Mia, my daughter's just come home from her freshman year in college, but her senior year was really eye-opening. There were a lot of things that we had to pay for that you wouldn't think you'd have to pay for in a public education. And it wasn't crazy expensive, but I'd say over the course of the year, I probably ended up spending about $500 just in public school. That's just now that was a graduation year, so there are all these pomp and circumstance type things that the events that maybe are not completely necessary, but they're part of what we think of in America as the standard things you go through.
Well, that's one of the things that it also mentioned when I was doing the research, is that one of the things that you don't have to look forward to paying for is the different fundraisers.
It's fair. Now, I don't know. I did read in my reading, there are a lot of co-ops and things like that where, like you said, these shared groups where they get together, and maybe Johnny's dad is really good at teaching history, and Susie's mom is really good at teaching math, and whatever it is. So they kind of group together and say, hey, we don't all have to quit our jobs so that we can homeschool our kids. We'll kind of take a shared approach, and we'll work 4 days a week, and everybody gets a day, or however we're going to do it. I think the key is the flexibility. I think you see these people on TikTok and whatever, where they live in a camper and they just travel the country, exploring the country, and they work in school when they can. Their kids seem relatively well adjusted, as far as I can tell. I do worry some about the socialization. Sure, you might be able to take your kids to a homeschool playgroup to get socialization, or even a sports team. You have them join the local public school sports team. I know Tim Tebow was homeschooled, but he played football for Nice in Jacksonville.
Right.
So, but the thing is, if so much of your interactions with the rest of the world are controlled in this controlled environment, do you risk homogenizing your peers so that, well, I only spend time with the rich white kids. Now, arguably, school districting has the same effect. But I do see a lot of potential. For instance, if you are of that more religious persuasion, and that's what's driving you to homeschooling, maybe your kid's missing out on understanding that, like, hey, some people have different beliefs and different structures, and I don't know that I believe that's a good thing.
Well, but on the flip side too, if you have the kid that's homeschooled, and if they're given a proper education, and I think there's a way to teach to about different cultures, then I don't want to get depressing, but there's been some kids who are no longer with us because of the bullying that was subjected to them in the public schools. Whereas if they were homeschooled, they would have been free to be themselves and not have that kind of pressure.
I think that's fair. I do think one of the keys that I just kept thinking about as I went through all the pros and cons and all of the demands on a family who chooses homeschooling versus public school or versus private school even was it does come down to setting a heavy burden for parental involvement. And parents, unfortunately, in this world, you got good ones and you got bad ones. So I could see a lot of potential where a an abusive parent hides abuse by saying, "Hey, you're going to stay home with me. You're not going to that public school. I don't want you talking to whatever." But I could also see, like you said, "Hey, I don't want you getting bullied by Johnny because Johnny's a real tool." So I could see it either way. I think there's a good side and a bad side to that particular thing. But I actually think that if you have, based on what I researched and the more I thought about it, if you have that really engaged parent who is doing this out of a sense of like, I just truly believe this is best for my kid. It's going to let them learn, like I said, like Holt said, what they're ready to learn when they're ready to learn it. I'm going to make sure they learn stuff and they're a good, well-adjusted person. Um, I think it's a really good system. I again, it totally changed my perceptions in the
Hmm.
last 24 to 48 hours.
Now, not everyone is going to be able to afford the cost of homeschooling. And so, what I'm going to bring about is just something that, I had a friend in high school uh, that went through that. I don't know if this still goes on today, but I know that the area that she was in, the school wasn't as good. So she simply found a class that was taught at my high school that wasn't taught at her high school, and that enabled her to attend my
Interesting.
high school. So that would be something that if the area where your kid is in isn't the best, and you're able to find a way to get to the other school, go for it. But as long as that it's going to be a class that the kid is going to be find to be useful. And in this particular case, the class was Hebrew.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Well, I can see how that would be a difficult thing to find taught in a school.
and 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 she was actually one of the top pupils, uh, without being Jewish.
Wow.
Yeah,
So I actually want to go back to that. I think it's a really interesting thing that you mentioned. That is, to me, Hebrew wasn't taught at my high school. It wasn't taught at any level of my school. So I can see how that's sort of maybe not advanced, but just a unique class and
right.
unique learning opportunity that most people in public school and even possibly many private schools would not get. So I could see if that's important to you as a family, that being, hey, you know what? It may be difficult, but one of us is going to work, one of us is going to stay home and teach the kids because that's important to us. On the flip side of that, I think one of the concerns I have, and maybe this doesn't happen, I may just be negative, but one of the concerns I have is just like schools often will teach to the minimum. Now, I think public schools often, especially with the testing,
Right.
bring everybody down to at least a medium, maybe. Um, I could see the potential where a parent would say, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to take you to school. You just got to pass your GED." Now, not everybody who finishes homeschool gets a GED. Now they have diplomas and things like that.
Right.
But I could see the potential for abuse as well. Just
Yeah, I mean, I think there's potential for abuse in anything, but I think that ultimately, we've got to speak to the parents that are just looking in for the good of the kid.
yeah,
Because I mean, you're going to find the other ones anywhere.
I think
Um,
most parents though do, whether the outcome is for the in the best interest of the child or not. They believe that they're acting in their child's best interest and really are trying.
for the most part.
Yeah. So, but no, like I said, I again, I had my eyes opened and my opinions changed a little bit when it comes to homeschooling because I was firmly in the absolutely not. This is just what the because again, this is my experience, and my experience was people I had encountered, and again, it was a small sample size,
Yeah.
but it forms your opinions, and it was just a negative sample size. But as I learned more about where it's come from, where it's going, I agree. I think the times I learned most were when I was allowed the freedom to now, or just took the freedom and just said, "I'll make a C. It's fine. I'll go study this." Um,
Well, and I have friends. I have friends from Jacksonville. I have friends from college who homeschool their kids, and the kids are given an amazing education. Uh, One that's filled with the arts, one that's filled with math, robotics, anything all and above. And I think that speaks to the parents, uh, because in most of these cases, the parents are extremely intelligent and extremely talented. In one particular case, uh, one is an engineer,
wow.
and then one is she ended up homeschooling the kids, and she's incredibly intelligent and extremely talented. So she's got best of both worlds, the science and the arts, and being an amazing singer. So
Okay.
these are kids that grew up with, astronomy, geology, uh, Hamilton,
Yeah.
you know.
But one of the cool things, though, is now I don't want to give the impression that everybody who teaches homeschool has to be this incredibly intelligent person, or even really, you don't have to get a teacher's license in most places to teach homeschool. You just do it.
Really?
Yeah, but you can
Yeah.
sign up. There's a lot of resources out there. Actually, I had to
Mhm.
sift through to get some of the history and the knowledge that I gained. I had to sift through a lot of these places who were really just trying to sell you a curriculum for one reason or another. Some of them were very religious. Some of them were very secular. Some of them focused on the arts more. Some of them focused more on the science. And they really did have so many options and so much guidance that I think pretty much anybody, if they really put their mind to it, no matter what, as long as you can read, I guess, and communicate somewhat effectively.
I can read.
Good job.
Thanks.
Good job. But as long as you could do that, I think anybody could do it. And if if my daughter were of the age where I had to make those decisions today, I don't know that I'd decide not to send her to public school, but I would definitely give homeschooling a really serious round of thought. When you think about some of the things you see going on in schools today, some of the focus on, like you said, rote memorization and testing, as opposed to true learning and developing a passion for lifelong learning.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think maybe homeschooling is kind of the way of the future.
But now that goes to lead, because you ended up getting remarried.
Fair.
You have a lot of these households where it's a single parent household, or maybe the kids are spending equal amount of time, which not necessarily both parents are set up for success in homeschooling.
That's fair. That's fair. There is an element, and I say this without all of the political garbage that goes along with it. I think there's an element of privilege when it comes to homeschooling, even if you're not well off.
Right.
Just having people who are creative and able to say, well, one of us is going to work and the other is going to do this, or like you said, having the flexibility to say, this is going to be the program. Sorry, mom, your time's going to be on the weekend. Sorry, dad, your time's going to be on the weekend. However, you have to arrange.
You need to have a support structure, and that leads to the community teachings as well. So where you have, it might be one parent that's doing the homeschooling, taking in a few different kids,
Yeah,
and being in charge of that.
I can see that. I actually really I kind of fell in love with the model of the. I kind of in my mind framed it as the Hillary Clinton approach, because remember the whole "it takes a village to raise a kid."
Oh, yeah,
and all
yeah.
That. I kind of fell in love with the idea of this group of parents who said, "Hey, we are going to homeschool the kids," and not Susie's mom is going to homeschool the kids, or Johnny's dad is going to homeschool the kids, but we are going to homeschool the kids, and that gives you the socialization. Like, it gives you a lot of things. It gives you a lot of different perspectives. And that's, I thought that was a really cool
Well,
concept.
you're also able to go ahead and teach more to the needs of the student when you have one parent slash teacher and 5 or 6 kids versus some of these classes that are 30 to 40 kids in a class.
Yeah.
And you're not able to go ahead and speak to the needs of any particular student when you have a class that size.
Yeah, and somebody's ultimately going to fall through the cracks, unfortunately, when you have a situation like that. In spite of the best efforts of most teachers, when you have 40 kids you're trying to keep track of, and probably 40 kids times, what, 5 classes if in a 7-period course, you're going to have a hard time. So,
and that was another statistic that I had that I'm not sure where. Oh, here, pupil to teacher ratio.
Okay, I'm curious about this one. This is going to be
so. This one, I don't have the exact figures on, but I have the best states and the worst states.
Okay.
So the top 5 of the best states are Vermont, Maine, D.C., New Hampshire, New Jersey.
Okay, I believe that.
The lowest states: Alabama, Nevada, California, Arizona, and Utah.
Interesting.
So and that was interesting because I think that when you think of like a state like California, you think of more of the arts and such. But what this is saying is that the class size is just too high, and that it's actually the inverse of what we believe.
Absolutely. I really think one of the things, it's happening on a national scale. In Florida, we're really feeling it, is teacher pay is suffering. Of course, everybody's pay is not keeping up with the price of everything else. And teacher pay is atrocious. Florida is one of the lowest right now in the country. And it shows. We have people who move here thinking, well, I'm going to save so much on my taxes, but then they have to send their kids to private school because we can't keep teachers.
Right. And I've worked with people who are teachers that they've got their second job working either in retail or in restaurants.
And I could see that being an argument in favor of homeschooling. If your kid's English teacher, you go to the restaurant in the evening and you go, oh, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, you're working here. And they're, yeah, I got to get by. They're exhausted when they show up the next day at school and aren't able to give that 100% that most employers would expect of their employees, which affects your kid's outcome, most likely.
And I can understand that, but I would also argue that hopefully those parents would rally to give those teachers a pay increase so that they wouldn't have
to. I think they would if they could choose to themselves, but the reality is for every family with kids, you got at least one more that doesn't have kids. And so it's kind of one of those weird things where we don't get to choose, even though if we had our choice, it would be this way. I think that's the key is we're stuck with the decisions of others when we put our kids in public schools. And I think that's the driving force behind people who want to go to homeschool.
Right. Yeah. In the future, I'm hoping that there's some better options available, or maybe some funding available for those who choose to go a different route. Because in some cases, there are better options than the traditional schooling. I don't always agree with their reasoning, but in many cases, the reasons are valid, and it's better for the kids if they have some better options if they're having those issues in the schools that they have to attend.
Agreed. Or if just it's the right choice for them.
Right.
I think you said at the beginning was if it's the right choice for your kid, keep doing it.
Yeah. So, Daniel, what are we talking about next week?
So, next week, I actually would really like to talk about feedback systems. Now, when I say feedback systems, I mean methods of getting feedback, methods of giving feedback, and what works, what doesn't.
Oh my God.
So, like
thumbs social
up,
media?
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Oh my
happy,
God.
sad, stars, numeric systems. or maybe just a nicely worded email.
You know what? You just brought it up to me. One of my, I'm going to say it's probably one of my top 20 movies. And granted, I've had a bit of this right now, so I'm trying to remember. But John Cusack, the movie where he owned a record store.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Top five is the whole movie was top five.
High Fidelity.
High Fidelity, yeah.
Yep.
Top five this, top five that. Oh God, you're gonna make me think, aren't you?
Yeah, it's. I think it's going to be a good conversation. I had some interesting things go on that I'll bring up next week, so I think we're going to love it.
All right. What else?
I think this was a great night. Again, I highly recommend the Doc Swinson's Alter Ego Triple Cask. I thought that was delightful, and
I agree. I would get that.
I would definitely buy another bottle, so I probably will. I thought that was really good. So if you have an opportunity, please try it. And I thought this was a great conversation.
Yep.
We might have gone a little long, but I think we did a good job.
And by the way, if you own a Mac, just be very careful that you don't happen to do a screen recording, because apparently I did that, and it took up probably several gigs, like at least probably about 10 gigs of memory.
If you notice a skip in the recording, it's because we had to splice two recordings together because Brad ran out of space.
Oops.
Well, I really enjoyed this, and I hope you guys, anybody who's listening, can join us again. Please provide us feedback. If we went too long, if we said something you didn't like, let us know. Don't just give us a star, and we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, it's all about the content for you. So we're not making this for ourselves. Well, fuck it. We are making this for ourselves. But we want your feedback because we want to get you involved. If there's topics that you want to hear, if there's something that excited you, this week, let us know. And there's different ways to get in touch with us. You can. The name of the podcast is Wine, Whiskey, and Words, but our email is winewhiskeyandword@gmail.com. The words was taken. Daniel will be getting our website up and going soon.
Yes, the website is winewhiskeyandwords.com. And I will be working on that this weekend, and it'll be up as soon as I can get it with some actual content, not just a coming soon.
Yeah. But if there's a topic that you really want to hear discussed, let us know. If there's something that excited you in this past week that you just want brought up, let us know. We're always here about, we want to hear about good things happening in other people's lives.
Yeah, and we'll do our best to work everything in.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good one.
Peace out.